It was a normal Monday morning. The kind where everything seemed routine, quiet, almost peaceful. I was sitting at the kitchen table, halfway through my coffee, flipping through the sports section of the newspaper. The low hum of the refrigerator and the clink of my spoon in the cereal bowl were the only sounds, as if the world outside had paused for a moment. Then Katie dropped the bomb. I want a divorce. The words landed on the table between us with the same weight as if she had simply announced the weather. No anger, no drama. Just a simple, cold statement. I froze for a second, not out of shock but more because my brain had to process it. Was she serious? Was I even hearing her correctly? I didn't react the way she probably expected. No shouting. No pleading. Just, calm. I took another sip of my coffee, turned the page of the paper and asked, "Is that all?" She wasn't ready for that. I could see it in her face, the confusion, the frustration bubbling under the surface. Her fingers gripped the table and she slammed her hand down. "I'm serious, James," she said, her voice sharper now, demanding something from me. I lowered the paper slowly and looked her in the eye. "Katie, you haven't been much of a wife for over a year. If you want to go, just go. I'm not stopping you." She wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting it either, to be honest. But the truth was I was tired. Tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of ignoring the little signs that had been popping up all year. I knew she was seeing someone else. But for some reason, it was easier not to confront it, easier not to dig into that wound. I had already accepted the reality. But this felt different. The way she said it, like she had rehearsed it, like she had already made up her mind, was too much. It hit me like a switch had been flipped. I realized I couldn't just sit back anymore. I stood up, grabbed my coffee, and without a second glance, I walked to my home office. My mind was racing. She wanted out. Fine. I was done too. She could go. Katie's face flushed with frustration. Her eyes narrowed and then, slamming her hand on the table, she demanded, "You're not taking me seriously, James." "I'm serious." The sound of her palm hitting the wood echoed in the silence between us, cutting through the calm like a sharp knife. For a moment I thought about the scene she expected. Maybe the pleading, maybe the desperation. She probably wanted me to fall apart, to beg her not to go. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Not today. Not after everything. I put the coffee mug down and looked at her, my voice steady. "Katie, you haven't been much of a wife for over a year now. If you want to leave, just go. I'm not stopping you." I could see the surprise flicker in her eyes. She wasn't expecting me to be so calm, so composed. But honestly, what was the point of making a scene? The decision had already been made in my mind. I wasn't angry, just resigned. She stood there, her hands still hovering over the table, like she was waiting for some kind of reaction. But I wasn't going to give it to her. I wasn't going to fall for the trap. She wanted out, fine. She could leave. As I stood there watching Katie's face twist with a mix of anger and disbelief, something in me just clicked. The weight of the past year and a half hit me all at once. I had known. Deep down I had known. Her behavior had shifted long ago, subtle at first. She'd been distant, always finding excuses to stay out late, to be somewhere else. There were whispers of someone else, lingering in the back of my mind like a dull ache. But I let it slide. I convinced myself it was just stress, or maybe she was just tired of me. Truth be told, I didn't want to confront it. Confrontation meant upheaval, and I wasn't ready for that. It was easier to bury the suspicions, to ignore the late nights, the unexplained absences. I let the silence stretch, the distance grow, all in the name of maintaining peace, of pretending everything was fine. But now, standing in front of me, was the truth I had been avoiding. She wasn't just distant, she was already gone in more ways than one. And I had known it all along. I had just been too afraid to admit it to myself. So why bother pretending anymore? The peace I had been clinging to was an illusion, and deep down I had already made my peace with that. I had no more energy to fight it. It was time to face reality. A strange sense of finality washed over me as I stood there, the words, "I want a divorce," still hanging in the air. Something about it felt too rehearsed, too clean. Like she had been waiting for this moment, like she'd planned it out in her mind long before she said it. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a spontaneous decision. This was a calculated move, one she'd been building up to possibly for months. I felt a sharp twinge of anger, but it wasn't the kind that would make me raise my voice or lash out. It was the kind of anger that made you cold, made you think. I walked out of the kitchen without saying another word, my mind already working. I grabbed a notebook and a pen, sitting down to write a note to myself. The words spilled out, "Thank you God she is leaving me." I wasn't sure why I wrote it. Maybe it was to acknowledge the relief I felt, or maybe I just needed something concrete, a marker to remind me of what was happening. Then I had an idea. I grabbed a lottery ticket from my wallet and slipped it into an envelope. The envelope wasn't for Katie though. It was for Tyrone, the man I knew she'd been seeing. I addressed the envelope, my hand steady, and then thought about it for a moment. I could feel the control slowly slipping back into my hands. This wasn't just her decision anymore. She thought she was calling the shots, but I was done letting her dictate the narrative. I sealed the envelope, the weight of the ticket inside suddenly feeling like a declaration. When I handed her the envelope, she looked at me, confused. Her eyes searched mine, but I didn't explain. She could take it or she could leave it. Either way, it was out of my hands. Katie's face flushed a deep red as she ripped the envelope from my hand. Her eyes scanned it quickly, then shot back to me, confusion and anger swirling together. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with frustration. I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to explain myself, not now. "Give this to him," I said flatly. "Or better yet, maybe I'll deliver it myself. I trust you won't open it, right?" She snapped. "You think you're so clever." "Not clever," I replied, my voice calm and steady. "Just done." Her anger flared, but I didn't care. I turned on my heel, not waiting for her response. I had already made up my mind. "Pack your bags and get out of my house," I added, almost as an afterthought. She stood frozen for a moment, like she hadn't expected me to be so resolute. But I wasn't about to let her drag this out. The decision had been made, and now it was time to act. I went straight to the bank, making sure to empty every joint account we had, transferring everything into my personal accounts. I didn't hesitate. Katie might have thought she still had some claim to the life we'd built, but that was over now. I also made sure to lock down all our important documents, clearing out anything of value, leaving nothing behind except for a few meaningless papers. The weight of the tasks felt oddly freeing, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. She wanted to control the narrative, but now the power was mine. At work, I kept my composure, pretending everything was normal. I knew what people expected. Business as usual, the steady hum of emails and meetings. I didn't want anyone to see that my world had just been flipped upside down. The office felt like a sanctuary of normalcy, and I clung to it, focusing on tasks that required no emotional investment. Maria, my assistant, noticed something was off, of course. She always did. She was perceptive, and today I could see the glint of concern in her eyes. But she didn't press me, thankfully. She simply carried on with her work, like she always did, offering me the space to do what I needed without asking the questions I wasn't ready to answer. As the hours passed, I moved carefully, quietly, handling things behind the scenes. While the office buzzed with its usual energy, I was setting things in motion. I had already made the calls to my lawyer, and the financial changes I'd initiated were already underway. There were moves to be made, and I wasn't about to let anything slip. The world around me was moving, but I stayed in control, keeping my focus. The tension from earlier still simmered beneath the surface, but I wasn't about to let it show. Not here. Not yet. Katie tried, of course. She made her moves, trying to pull me back into the mess she had created, but I wasn't playing her game anymore. Every word she said, every attempt to twist the situation in her favor, felt like a faint echo as I focused on the next steps. I had already started securing the house. The locks were changed that afternoon, a locksmith dispatched without hesitation. It wasn't about security, not really, it was a statement. She no longer had a claim here. While the physical changes to the house were happening, I was working just as quickly on securing my legal position. Calls were made to my lawyer, papers drafted, plans set in motion. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a battle for control, and I wasn't about to let her dictate how it played out. The whole process felt mechanical, almost detached. I could see her confusion and anger from earlier still lingering in the air, but I wasn't moved. This wasn't about emotions anymore. I had already accepted what was happening. My actions were cold, calculated, and deliberate. I was no longer the man who would wait for her to make the next move. I was the one calling the shots now. I filed for divorce that day, the weight of the decision still heavy in my chest, but the relief that came with it was undeniable. It wasn't just about ending the marriage, it was about taking back control. My lawyer Alex had been clear. File first, set the terms. It wasn't just legal strategy, it was the only way to ensure she didn't dictate the narrative. Along with the divorce papers, I also secured a restraining order. Katie had already shown how far she was willing to go, and I wasn't about to let her keep pushing, not when I was finally taking a stand. The legal moves were just the first steps in what I knew would be a long battle, but they felt like the right steps. There was an emotional weight to it, of course. How could there not be? But I kept pushing it aside, focusing on what needed to be done. There was no room for sentimentality now. This was about survival, about keeping my ground in the face of everything she had thrown at me. As I prepared for the upcoming legal fight, I felt the last of the tension begin to shift. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward, no longer weighed down by the fear of what she might do next. The storm had passed, and I was finally the one in control. I had hoped the worst was behind me, but Katie made it clear she wasn't done. That evening, I came home to find the garage door wide open, a strange sight given that I knew I'd locked it before leaving. The house felt different, the air thick with something off. I walked inside and my heart sank. The kitchen was a disaster. Plates shattered on the floor, drawers pulled out and scattered as if someone had been searching for something. But that wasn't the worst of it. As I moved through the house, I found the living room in disarray, lamps smashed, bookshelves emptied. My pulse quickened, but it wasn't fear. It was anger, pure and sharp. She'd crossed a line. This wasn't just a tantrum, it was a deliberate act of malice. Then I went upstairs. There, in the master bedroom, my clothes were piled in a heap on the floor. Suits, shirts, even my favorite jacket, all drenched in a smell that hit me like a punch in the gut. She had urinated on them. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process the absurdity of it all. This wasn't just revenge. This was a woman who was unraveling, and she was taking everything down with her. But in that moment, I felt a cold clarity. I had already installed security cameras when I filed for the restraining order, just in case. And now the footage caught it all. Her breaking in, trashing the house, even the moment she desecrated my clothes. This was it. This was the evidence I needed. It was her last, desperate attempt to regain control, and it was exactly what I needed to ensure the restraining order stayed in place and that the legal case would be solidified in my favor. I wasn't about to let her destroy me, not when I had the upper hand. The footage was a weapon, one I didn't hesitate to use. As twisted as it was, I knew I was done with her. The days following the finalization of the divorce felt like a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had won. Katie was legally barred from the house, the restraining order was permanent, and the mess she left in her wake was cleaned up, both physically and legally. But there was no triumphant moment, no sense of total victory. It didn't feel like the world had finally righted itself. Maria and I began to spend more time together. It was slow, comfortable, and a refreshing change from the chaos I'd lived through. We went out for dinners, had drinks at quiet bars, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long time, I felt appreciated. I could see a future there, something genuine and new. But even as I started to rebuild, the emotional scars of Katie's betrayal lingered. There were moments when I would catch myself thinking about everything I'd been through, the lies, the hurt, the destruction, and I'd feel a knot tighten in my chest. I was free, yes, but the damage had been done. It wasn't that I regretted my decisions. On the contrary, I knew I'd made the right moves. But there were pieces of my life that had been ripped apart, and no amount of rebuilding could erase that. The scars remained, not visible, but deeply ingrained in the way I viewed relationships, trust, and love. With Maria, I didn't rush anything. We moved forward, but I wasn't blind to the past. I wasn't ready to forget what had happened, but maybe I could finally accept it. In the end, I wasn't just recovering from a divorce. I was learning to let go one step at a time and finding peace in the pieces that remained.